But basically what this is, it's based on an old communist guy. I can't remember his name. Whether it was Bomper or Balyi, two of the key guys who have done in terms of research into athlete development and all that sort of stuff anyway. He came up with this fancy model ages ago, but it's been fairly well accepted as a pretty good sort of, just an outline of how kids go in terms of their, to achieve greatness and success at a high level, what the sort of stages of those development are. And this has been one of the ones that's, I suppose, been most accepted in, you know, sports sort of research and stuff like that. And basically it's broken down into 5 different categories. You can only see 4 of them on the screen, and there's one of them at the bottom which is recycling, which is just after they get to the end of their playing career, then obviously you try and, rather than lose their knowledge and experience from the sport, you try and recycle them through. You know, and that's obviously part of the process that we have as well today. But I just wanted to go through some of these things that I think are really important, and I'll go this side so hopefully you can see it all right. Okay, so at the top here we've got or actually we'll go down the side here. These are the different stages that we talk about. So the fundamental stage, training to train stage, training to compete, and training to win. So you can sort of get a bit of a gist by their title what they are. They have a rough age that is associated with that level of development, but it's not specifically set in terms of their chronological age. It's more to do with their training age. So if they've never played any sport or anything like that, and then all of a sudden at 15 they decide they want to start playing sport, then they will still enter the, enter this pathway at this level, and then work their way through. And across the top we've got the priority of motivating factors. So they're listed in order of the major priority for most kids at that sort of level, and why they play sport. So remember, they're ranked in priority order, and you'll notice as you go down the different levels they change. All right, same thing with, they have performance improvement via a variety of different means. All right, so have a bit of a look at that, and then obviously the sort of training and activities that are appropriate with that age group, and then retention that relates back to this. So if we're talking about how do we keep kids involved in the game, how do we keep them interested for 10 years, this one's going to go a long way towards helping you do that. All right, understanding this model. So if we talk our way through it, we'll try and whiz through it a little bit if we can, but the priority of motivating factors for basically your fundamental athletes, so your 6 to 10-year-olds, what are those things that are most important? Well, obviously immediate fun and enjoyment. They have to be having fun. If they're not having fun, they won't come back, period. All right, so they don't have enough commitment to the sport, they don't have the concentration span, any of that sort of stuff. If they're not having a good time, they won't come back. Obviously there's lots of elements of socialisation, so the mateship and hanging out with their buddies and all that sort of stuff. We talked about that already. And developing skills is most definitely, even at this early age, when they start off and they can't throw anywhere near their partner over there, but they slowly over the course of the season they develop a little bit of strength and they start being able to hit a target more consistently, or they pitch for the first time and they start throwing strikes. They have that sense of satisfaction in those sorts of things, and obviously that's reinforcing for them to want to keep coming back. All right. Obviously they change a little bit as you get to the training to train stage. So as they get a little bit older, developing skills becomes quite often a more important factor to them. So it's not now necessarily just about just purely hanging out with your mates, just having fun. Some kids at this age start to develop the idea of how increasing their performance in the game can actually help improve their, I suppose, enjoyment of the game and their satisfaction. Right? So they're obviously starting to learn about, if you play better, if you perform better, it's more fun. You can potentially achieve goals and all those things like we talked about. You can see fun and enjoyment is still most definitely a critical factor, but it's not necessarily for all of them the #1 priority, where it pretty much is up here. As you can probably work out too, each kid develops through this sort of pathway at their own rate. So again, it might not necessarily just be specifically these age, and once they turn 10 years old, all of a sudden fun and enjoyment goes to the bottom. It's a process that they go through at their own pace, and you need to work out where they are in terms of that process. But I'm hoping this is going to help you guys get a bit of an idea. So again, when we were out here at the QBBA and we're working with largely 16 to 18-year-olds, and some of the best kids in the state, if you guys are involved in those sessions. Again, you're not necessarily just going to cut and paste exactly what we do here and run your under 12 club team in exactly the same way, are you? You know, there's going to be some little differences. You might include some of the same skills, but your training session, the structure is going to be different. Some of the activities that you do is definitely going to be different. You can see as they get to training to compete down here, you know, especially with boys more so than girls, but still to a certain extent within girls, the status of achieving goals and making selection in representative teams and those sort of things becomes part of the motivating factor. All right, and for a lot of kids, particularly boys, in their teenage years, this is a big one. And we definitely have to tap into that. We need to have that carrot there available for them, all right, because it is obviously really important part of that. But you can see how fun is still in there, but it's a little bit further down the path. As we start getting to sort of this age as well, you can see how there's potentially the identification of a career path, of some more long-term goals and that sort of stuff. Again, you know, you don't necessarily always talk to, you know, 6 to 8 year olds about them playing in the major leagues. You know, you might just create a story or something and how much fun it would be coming up in the bottom of the ninth, just having a bit of fun with it. But it's not necessarily going to be as powerful as it might be for someone down here. You know, as long as that helps this kid have a good time, then it's probably good. But here it has a different impact. It's identifying that potential career path. Because at this stage, that's where they're starting to think a bit more long-term. Batesy?
Just on that, something I noticed when I was at Indians coaching a wide variety of kids,
yep,
all the way to A grade and under 20s down to under 8s, you change personalities with these kids.
Yep.
And that's something that facilitates that fun that Shane was talking about. You're not going to coach an under 8 kid the same way you're going to coach an under 16 kids. And sometimes people do forget that.
Yep, most definitely.
Check their ego at the door.
Yep.
Become a coach.
Yep.
Forget your fight with the missus or whatever you've just done.
Yeah.
Come in with a different, it's hard to do.
Yeah, it is. The communication styles and all that sort of stuff, and Shane will talk more about that in terms of the, you know, on the weekly sessions and all that sort of stuff, develop some stuff for that. But yeah, most definitely. And this is why I'm trying to help you guys get an understanding of it, because again, when you see things within the QBA program, we might do things a certain way, but again, it doesn't mean that that's right across all situations. That just means that this is what we think is the best way to do it in this particular situation. You guys need to accept that when you then go back to your club situation or your under 8s team or your under 10s team, that you might have to adapt that information somehow and apply it appropriately to the level of group that you've got. All right, so you guys are pretty under control. Obviously down here you can't actually see it too good. Sorry, where is it on that? I'll be able to read it on that. It might be easier. Yeah, so it's a shorter list, but that's obviously when athletes are starting to get to, you know, international competition and stuff. And again, the status tends to be a more motivating factor. Sometimes then you actually get finances coming into it when there's potentially contracts or endorsements or those sorts of things on the line. They can also be motivating factors as well. But again, as is the case with the priority of motivating factors, they achieve performance improvement via a number of different things. And again, that changes from stage to stage. But you'll notice, what's the one constant in every one of these levels? What's the first one on the list? Continued participation. So if they stop playing baseball, how do they get better? All right? So even though all the rest of them change a little bit, this one is constant through them all. So this is what we're talking about, trying to keep kids involved in the game for at least 10 years. It takes 10 years or 10,000 hours of deliberate practice to try and develop expertise in a given area, in a given skill, in a given sport. If it takes 10 years, right, we need to find a way to keep them involved for 10 years. So even if you don't teach them all of the skills that you know within that first season that you got them, it doesn't matter, as long as you keep them coming back. As long as you keep them coming back, they're a chance to continue to improve. Eventually, at some point, they might catch a spark. They might get something that really hooks them, or they might have a growth spurt. They might get a bit stronger, whatever it is. There might be something that really hooks them, and all of a sudden, they just take off. But if you lose them from the game because you didn't nurture them, stimulate them in an appropriate way that rewarded them, gave them the things that they need to continue to keep coming back, if you don't do that, then we lose them. All right? And one of the biggest issues, I guess, that as a sport we've had, particularly when we have to compete against all of the other sports and stuff that are out there that have got more money, more marketing, more resources, good quality people that get paid a lot of money to do these roles, baseball doesn't have that. So we have to do, at the front line, you guys, the coaches, need to produce the absolute best programs that you can to make sure we keep kids in the sport. Our long-term success depends on you guys.
It's the difficulty as a club coach, I guess, particularly from 14s through to 18s, is that as a club coach you have players that are all at different stage levels.
Yeah.
So you've got a pro player with a guy in the under-20s team who's just there to sort of make numbers and have fun.
Yep.
And
So
trying to get a program that...
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it?
It's easier state program because they're basically all at that stage.
Yeah.
As a club coach, that's the difficulty.
So what are some ways that you could potentially address that situation? Because a lot of you guys are going to be in that same situation.
Get assistant coaches or...
Yeah, assistant coaches are good. And how would they help you?
just take different groups.
Yeah, so you could separate them and deal with them on a level that is appropriate for each individual, or alternatively you could do what?
Parents involved.
Yeah, parents involved, but who else could you engage?
The elite players.
Yeah, perfect. There you go. That's a perfect example. You could, for instance, give the elite player more responsibility, more opportunity to learn, more opportunity to practice communicating, more opportunity to get to understand skills in their head by doing what? Asking him to do what?
Coach the other.
Yeah, coach the younger kids. Gives him an additional skill, some leadership, some responsibility, some communication, and it does what for little Johnny who's maybe not quite so good? What does it do for him? What does he get out of it?
When he sees a kid a year or two above him.
Yeah, he sees a more elite kid, a kid who's got better experience than him, spending some specific time with him, contributing to helping him get better. That's a way that you can help to address it. It's not going to answer all your questions or whatever, but that's just one way.
Point, though,
yeah.
Because at club level, you tend to gravitate to your worst kid.
Yeah. And then the big kids.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
You go the other way, and the other kid's going,
And then I suppose
we're really going to hit the ball that far.
You're talking about keeping that kid engaged.
You've got to find a way to engage every kid, no matter what level in this they're at. And you guys will deal with a pretty broad level.
Then we need to also teach those more elite kids, when they're in these QBBA programs and stuff like that, to help out at club level. Because they come back to club level and they have this elite status.
Yeah.
And they don't want to do it.
And it can most definitely go to head. So we introduced it last year. We introduced this mentoring thing last year because we introduced the expanded QBA last year with the intention of trying to make sure that those kids knew that part of their scholarship for the QBA was that they had a responsibility to help mentor the younger kids at their region, the younger kids at their clubs. They're always going to be a role model and that sort of stuff. It wasn't probably addressed with the accountability maybe that I was hoping, and that's my fault. But there were certainly some kids that took it on board, but again there were others that just required me to be on them about it constantly, and I was distracted with other things. I didn't do a good enough job. But that is a renewed focus again, as the coaches education program is this year. That mentoring aspect of our scholarship kids will be expected to help the young kids at the regional sessions, but they will also be expected to do that same thing when they're out there in clubland.
Because it is a real segmentation just on the program, and the feedback that I got from the guys, the Thursday night was an inclusive with all of them.
Yep.
And believe it or not, the kids that weren't the high performance kids, they enjoyed the Saturday session better.
Yeah.
Because they didn't feel intimidated.
Yep.
And even though the scholarship kids were helping them,
yep.
That was the feedback that I got. They went, we actually like the Saturday session better than the Thursday session.
And that's why I like the sort of format that we've used.
So we've got to try and still work that.
We've got to find a balance. Yeah.
Whatever night it is.
Yeah, and ultimately, look, again, ultimately you would always have a group of kids that are, I guess, grouped in that training environment by their ability level. But our current system has them graded based on their age. And they're not always, just because they're at the same age, they're not always necessarily at the same ability level. So you guys as coaches, one of the things that is going to be the challenge is finding a way to stimulate guys that are at a very different level and have very different motivating factors, right? But doesn't matter, just because one's elite and one's not elite doesn't mean that either one of those is more important to our sport. This is where we have to do a better job of catering to all of them. And that's what, the change in the pathway review and all that sort of stuff is leading towards.